no one can really prepare you for what happens when you leave Christianity or any other faith for that matter. What happens to you emotionally, what happens to you relationally. And it's not just about the beliefs that are changing, it's also about all the other stuff that came after. And so one of the biggest things that was probably my biggest challenge was the reaction from friends and family. And so you might be in this situation where people are very confused because you're changing or you're not showing up for church. And they're very much taught to try to bring you back in. And they're taught if somebody's not showing up to church, you might be backsliding or sinning or all these other things. So I had a pastor that would call and message me for months after I left the church trying to get me to come back, even after repeatedly trying to set boundaries. And so that was a big one. I had people telling me that they were worried about my soul and worried I was going to go to hell. And this made things so much more complicated because your beliefs are already shifting in a way that's very confusing. And on top of that, then you have people questioning or making judgments on you. And the next thing I kind of noticed was all the fear and guilt and shame that kind of started to come because on one hand, I knew like things were changing and I couldn't quite believe the same. And then on the other hand, I had been conditioned to feel guilty if I wasn't in church or feel guilty I wasn't reading the Bible or, worshiping with other believers and so on. So that was a massive thing for me to try to overcome as I was going through this process. Another big thing is a shift in your structure. For me, I volunteered at my church. I worked at my church. I attended church. And when I started to pull away from that, I kind of was lost. I didn't really know what to do. I didn't know what to do on Sundays. My entire identity was wrapped up in going to church, being at church, being around other believers. And so when I started to scale that back, it became lonely. It became confusing. I noticed very quickly that a lot of my friendships that developed there were pretty much only developed because we had the one big thing in common of a belief system. And so when those relationships started to fall apart, not all of them, but a lot of them, that was incredibly hurtful and challenging to try to get through because it was already a rough time as it was, trying to understand what I was believing or not believing anymore. And so this is a big thing that you go through kind of in the beginning. It's completely normal. It's also kind of unfortunate, but you do find out real quickly when you leave a faith community or church who your actual friends really are, And so I feel like I had to start really being picky with who I would choose to share these things with. I was lucky in a way that I had friends that were not believers, so I still did have some friends, but the bulk of the people that I was around on a regular basis for many, many years just kind of started to fade away. And so that could be really challenging, dealing with the fear, dealing with the loss of community, dealing with your loss of identity. And this is a big one. And I feel like even years deconstructing, I am still rebuilding an identity because I was taught and forced to basically not have one. So I chuckle because it's actually not funny. But when I look back and think about that, it's like, my gosh, you're taught not to trust your own thoughts, not to trust your own feelings, not to trust your own desires, not to put anything above God. And so for me, looking back, it was like all of my identity, if there ever was one, was stripped away, and then you have to go through the process of slowly rebuilding, like, who am I? What do I believe? What do I not believe? What are my values? A lot of people think you can't have morals and values if you're not in a particular faith. That's a real big thing that was pushed on me. How can you really love others if you don't love God? Stuff like that. So as you go through this, it's a healthy thing to really start trusting yourself and starting to normalize uncertainty in a lot of different areas, be it your beliefs, the uncertainty of how relationships may change or end altogether. And there could be so much grief and loss that happens during this time. And it's very normal, and it can be very challenging. And it is why it is so important to either find resources or safe people that you can just be around and be yourself and not worry about being questioned on, why are you not doing this? Why aren't you coming to church? Why aren't you here? And I just wanted to share that because it can feel like such unshaky ground when you deconstruct beliefs, and then that second layer comes of like losing that community that was like your biggest cheerleader, your biggest support system, and then you walk away and they kind of do too. It's like you almost don't even have anything in common anymore. So that could be really unfortunate, but it's quite normal. You're not doing anything wrong. You're not alone in going through this. And there are resources out there. I ended up following a bunch of people on, social media or YouTube just to have a little bit of grounding for myself as everything was just kind of falling apart. And so if you can relate to this, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. I really appreciate you watching, and I hope this helps someone, and I'll continue to cover a lot of these things going forward.